Just yesterday, we watched drones attacking new targets in Russia. And here it goes again. I'm Maria Drutska, and today I will tell you about how the Russian Federation's Ministry of Murder reported yesterday morning that as many as 100 drones were shot down over Russian territory, including the temporarily occupied Crimea. While they were shooting down exactly 100 drones, their Russian military forces accidentally shot down another one of their own helicopters. Also, I really want to analyze with you Putin's visit to North Korea. I know you all laughed at the tombstone that Kim gave to Putin. If you haven't seen, here it is. And if you haven't seen how a North Korean humiliated the Russian ministers and deputy prime ministers who were part of the Russian delegation, I will tell you about it as well and why it is all worse than you thought, to the point that even the United States is concerned. So, last night, as the defense forces of Ukraine attacked the Afipsky, Ilsky, Krasnodar and Astrakhan oil refineries, as reported by our general staff. There were also strikes on radar stations and electronic reconnaissance center in the Bryansk region and Crimea. In addition, there was a successful strike on storage locations and preparation sites for Shahid-type drones, training buildings, command and communication points of these drone units located in the Krasnodar region. Ukraine will continue to carry out sanction strikes on Russian military targets, and there is great news about this too, which I will tell you at the end of the video if you missed it. So, the Russian air defense system shot down a K-29 helicopter over Anapa. As a result of this sad accident, the entire crew of 4 people died. The Russians were hunting for our marine drones, but they shot down their own helicopter with the help of the Panzer air defense system. Guys, before I continue, I want to thank all of you who send coffees on Buy Me a Coffee and become Patreons. Also subscribe to my Twitter page where I post regular updates about the situation in Ukraine, and to my Instagram where I show the daily life in Ukraine. And the most interesting part, let's discuss now why Putin went to North Korea and what we need to know about this visit, because it is a very important topic. This is Putin's first visit to this country in all 25 years of his rule. Through the capital of North Korea, there are Russian flags, portraits of Putin, and inscription in Russian language, but you won't really see any people or cars there. They were brought in later. Here, little children were waving flags. Trained people were also waving flags, portraying unrestrained joy and dancing. It reminded me the Squid Game series, where people were killed if they didn't comply. And the video of Putin driving through the streets looks like it was made with some kind of cheap artificial intellect, to be honest. Well, what Putin saw in North Korea was hunger, terror, devastation, a total dictatorship, and complete dependence on China. And this is what awaits Russia too, because Russia becomes increasingly dependent on China now. Russian ministers were expelled from the negotiation room in North Korea for refusing to let Kim Jong-un enter the room first. Forced to leave the room decorated with the flags of the Russian Federation and North Korea, where the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, First Deputy Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister. Lavrov entered the room first and, exhausted, sat down at the table, after which he complained about getting something on himself. also visible in the video, where Deputy Prime Minister, Defense Minister, Health Minister, and the head of Roskosmos police exit to the hall, commanded a North Korean official off camera. A representative of the Russian delegation awkwardly asked, "And why did we come in here? You should have warned us before." "Our leader will enter first," he said. Well, then you can see the broadcast was interrupted at that point, followed by the photo of an empty meeting hall where Russian-Korean negotiations later were held with Putin and Kim Jong-un in expanded format. Well, that was a story, guys. And so about the visit. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, during his meeting with the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, declared that the fiery friendship between Moscow and Pyongyang is now even closer than in Soviet times, and promised the Kremlin chief full support and solidarity in waging war against Ukraine. Well, let's start with the fact that the South Korean defense minister earlier stated that North Korea has sent to Russia containers that could hold almost 5 million artillery shells. According to him, Seoul recorded at least 10,000 sea containers, which could contain up to 4.8 million artillery shells sent from North Korea to Russia. Well, guys, that's less than a year, and that's a lot. North Korea has dozens ballistic missiles sent to help Putin in war, and I think that now the Russian army on the battlefield is practically entirely dependent on North Korea. At the very least, Putin went there to get even more ammunition to shell Ukraine. It's clear that North Korea had significant reserves. One must understand that North and Southern Korea are still technically at war. It's not like, for instance, Germany, which decided 30 years ago that there would be no more war, we will be pacifist, we will live joyfully and develop in a completely different direction. No. North Korea has always been a militaristic dictatorship throughout its history. And of course, one thing they definitely have is plenty of ammunition, and their defense industry is pretty operational. But what do you think? What else could Putin have gone there for? Could it be to also bring North Korean soldiers to fight against Ukraine? Write me in the comments what you think. Is this possible, and will we soon see North Korean prisoners of war in videos? Why can we discuss this topic now? Well, Putin and Kim Jong-un signed a treaty in Pyongyang to further deepen cooperation between the two countries. Among other things, the document provides for mutual assistance in case of aggression against one of the parties. Interestingly, the treaty or agreement between Russia and North Korea copied a clause from the Soviet agreement with Pyongyang from 1961. The North Korean news agency published the text of the agreement signed by these two dictators. The clause on military assistance, which was absent in the previous treaty from 2000, appeared in the new version but was copied from the 1961 treaty. This clause states, in the event that one of the parties is subjected to armed attack by any state or group of states and thereby finds itself in a state of war, the other party shall immediately provide military and other assistance by all means at its disposal, in accordance with Article 51 of the UN Charter and in accordance with the legislation of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and the Russian Federation. In the 1961 treaty signed by Nikita Khrushchev, the obligations are stated in the same words, but without reference to the UN Charter and with the USSR replaced by the Russian Federation. What does the West say about all this? Well, the US President's administration stated that the meeting between Putin and Kim Jong-un demonstrates Moscow's attempt to assemble a coalition with North Korea, Iran, Syria, and to a certain extent China. This was stated by the Director for Europe of the National Security Council, Michael Carpenter. According to him, it is clear that this is about expanding partnership. At the same time, he added, this indicates where Russia has ended up on the world stage. North Korea, Iran, Syria have become its closest partners in the world, and then to a certain extent China, which although does not provide weapons to Russia, sends a lot of dual-use goods for the production of advanced weapons systems, he noted. Carpenter pointed out that Beijing supplies Moscow with nitrocellulose for the manufacture of gunpowder, optics, and machinery for the military-industrial complex, which increases the threat to Ukraine as well as to European security. This, in a broad sense, is the coalition that Russia is assembling. But compared with a coalition of 50 countries in the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, and then with approximately 100 countries that supported the principles of the UN Charter as a peace summit in Switzerland, and you will see a clear contrast. Earlier, Stoltenberg stated that NATO is concerned about the assistance Russia could provide to North Korea's missile and nuclear programs in the wake of the Kremlin master Vladimir Putin to visit to North Korea. As is known, Russia and North Korea have strengthened their military cooperation over the last year. It is known that Moscow received North Korean ballistic missiles and ammunition and promised Pyongyang its own technologies for satellite and missile programs, as well as conventional weapons such as tanks and aircraft. As Bloomberg agency wrote, as a result of the signed agreement, Kim Jong-un received an ally with a nuclear arsenal that will support him. This also means that he can continue to pursue his nuclear ambitions, and Russia uses its veto right in the UN Security Council to block any new sanctions. Against the backdrop of the signing of this comprehensive partnership treaty between North Korea and Russia, a representative of South Korean president stated that the country would review its policy regarding military aid to Ukraine. Currently, Seoul does not provide military aid to Kiev, limiting itself to humanitarian assistance. Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, while in Vietnam, stated that South Korea would make a big mistake if it supplied weapons to Ukraine, and Moscow would respond to this step. As for delivery of lethal weapons to the combat zone in Ukraine, that would be a very big mistake. I hope this does not happen. But if it does, we will also make corresponding decisions that the current leadership of South Korea will probably not like, Putin said in response to journalists' question at the end of his trip to Vietnam on June 20th. Well, it still seems to me that Seoul will now be thinking about how to further assist Ukraine. A representative of President administration stated that South Korea will review the issue of supplying weapons to Ukraine. The country condemned the agreement signed between Russia and North Korea. In an official statement, Seoul stated that the treaty violates UN sanctions. Let me remind you that South Korea is one of the world's largest producers of weapons. So far, it has refrained from supplying lethal military products to Ukraine. And the last thing, I will remind you of another piece of great news that you might have missed. Ukraine is allowed to use long-range American missiles to strike targets inside Russia, not just on the front lines near Kharkiv, if they act in self-defense. So, get ready. Pew pew beaches. Anyway, as always, I don't have time for all the news, and that's it for today. Thank you so much for supporting Ukraine and watching Ukrainian content. And if you like this video, you can support the channel's development on Patreon or buy me a coffee. See you soon, and Slava Ukraini! It's supposed to be black and white integration, like pew pew bitches.